Good morning from Asia. Good afternoon. Good evening to other regions. Indigenous greetings and Chajalo in my native language. Brothers and sisters from Latin America, Caribbean, Australia, Africa, Asia, Pacific, and all other regions. Today, we are in the Second World Conference of Indigenous Women, and in this interactive session on the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples recommendation, the UN Permanent Forum recommendation since 2013, the recommendations of the outcome, World Conference outcome document. And we are in this plenary session, we are in this interactive session with the slogan, Nothing About Us Without Us. I would like to thank all the Indigenous brothers and sisters and Indigenous women with disabilities who have attended this session. We are very much honored, and we would like to thank FIMI for providing this opportunity. And this program is being organized by National Indigenous Disabled Women Association of Nepal. So before I start this session, I would like to state some housekeeping rules that we have a Spanish speaking speaker and English speaking speaker. So kindly switch on your button for Nepali, English, and Spanish. We also have sign language interpretation for SLI services for deaf women. So I would like to request all my sisters and brothers, if there are any kind of technical support that you require during this session, please do let us know to the organizers. Today, I am very much honored to moderate this session, and we have very distinguished speakers from different parts of the world. We know that the Indigenous women and Indigenous women with disabilities faced multiple layers of discrimination. Being a woman, being Indigenous woman, and being women with disabilities, the multiple and intersecting identities creates many challenges. And when we look at these challenges has been enshrined in the legal document, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, Article 21 and 22, clearly outlines that special measures should be provided to Indigenous women, people with disabilities, elderly, and children. So if you look at the World Conference outcome document in 2015 in paragraph 9, it clearly outlines about the rights of Indigenous women and person with disabilities to improve their social economic condition, and also ensure that the legislation, the national legislative policies and instruments have to be ensure their rights and need to be inclusive of Indigenous women and Indigenous people with disabilities. It has also talked and mentioned about the disaggregated data, conduct survey, and also utilize the holistic indicators for Indigenous people's well-being to address the situation and needs of Indigenous people's individual rights and collective rights. We have also the UN Permanent Forum recommendations that has been provided in 2018 in paragraph 40, 41, 42, that clearly outlines about the status of Indigenous women at the high level interactive dialogue to strengthen their network and to have a disaggregated data by caste, ethnicity, sexual and reproductive health and rights, including funds, resources, and programs that is required for Indigenous women and other diversities. It has also mentioned about the efforts, the UN system efforts and the collaboration of different relevant stakeholders at different levels, at the national level, at the regional level, and at the global level. The UN Permanent Forum recommendation on 2019 clearly outlines about the full, effective, and meaningful participation of Indigenous people, including Indigenous women and Indigenous women with disabilities in the initiatives of peace and reconciliation. So by having all these informations provided by the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, UN Permanent Forum recommendations, and also the final outcome document of the First World Conference on Indigenous Peoples. This reflects that there are many things in the document. And in 2018, the General Secretary of the United Nations has also launched the first ever flagship report on disability and development. So these initiatives have been initiated at the global level. However, when it comes to the local level and in the reality on the ground, we still see that indigenous people, including indigenous women and women with disabilities, are still invisible. So for us, it is time to have a debate, to have a discussion that whether these international instruments that has been initiated and with the member state have committed their commitment to implement and to ensure the rights of indigenous peoples have been practiced and realized on the ground or not. So in this regard, this interactive session have been designed to look at the glance about the recommendations that has been provided to indigenous people, indigenous women, and women with disabilities. And in this regard, the three international major founding documents are crucial for us. I would also like to recall the report of the expert mechanism on the rights of indigenous peoples on different thematic areas and different thematic issues also clearly outlines about the rights of indigenous women and other groups. So in this regard, it is time for us to see and to reflect that whether indigenous women are visible in this context or not. And it is time to see and to analyze, internalize ourselves that where are we? When it comes to indigenous women with disabilities, I would say that many of the international documents clearly do not outline the issue of indigenous women with disabilities. And in that regard, I would say that we are still invisible. So that is why today we are discussing this event, very important event on indigenous women and women with disabilities. I would say that the political argumentations for advocacy to work on these initiatives that has been initiated at the global level is very crucial to all indigenous women and women with disabilities on the ground. So it is very crucial for all of us to know about the recommendations that has been provided by different mechanisms at the UN level. And to reflect those mechanisms on the ground makes a huge difference to advocate and to ensure our rights and to live a dignified life as an indigenous woman and women with disabilities. So without further delay, in this context, we have realized that if you look at the different geopolitical regions from Latin America, from Africa, Asia, from Australia, including different other regions, we have the common realities as indigenous women and women with disabilities. But despite these common realities also, relating with the different geographical region, we also have some differences. So in this session, we are supposed to have discussion with indigenous women with disabilities across the region to have their situation, to know about the context and situation at the regional level, to know about the situation of indigenous women and indigenous women with disabilities from different regions, because it is time for us to do a collective effort. Without further delay, I would now like to go to our distinguished speakers. We have speakers from Asia, Chongsing Koiren, who is representing Asia. We have other speaker from Pacific, Ipul Pasua. We have also a speaker from Africa, Christine Kuringi, And we have a speaker from Latin America, Olga Montufar Contreras. We also had a speaker from the development partners, as well as the constituency of person with disabilities, that was Women Enabled International. But we received an information from Women Enabled International that due to the health reasons, they were not able to attend this session. So we have some reflection from Women Enabled International, which will be shared shortly among all of you. So without further delay, I would now go towards our speakers. So the first speaker is Chongsin Koireng from Asia. She is representing Indigenous women with disabilities from Asia. She has graduated from Manipur University, serving as a General Secretary for All Tribal Disabled Union Manipur, and also board member for the Manipur State Disabilities Right to Information. And she is an activist involving in various social activities to fight and promote the rights of tribal people, Indigenous women, and women with disabilities. She is presently a member of the Manipur State Commission for the Women. So I would now like to give the floor to Chongsen Koren, who will be highlighting about the situation of Indigenous women and women with disabilities in Asia. The floor is yours, Chongsen. Over to you. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Am I audible? Hello.
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, thank you so much. Good morning from Asia and good afternoon and warmly Indigenous greetings from Asia to all the participants. And today I would like to extend my heartiest thanks to the organizer, that is FIMI and the NIDWAN, for giving me such a very great platform to come here together, join together with you all and share the situation of the Indigenous persons with disabilities and women with disabilities from Asia. And also I would like to thank Sister Pratima Guru. It is all because of her initiative, her concern and support that we are moving forward, and we are coming here today on this platform. So thank you so much. And now I will be highlighting some of the few points on the ground situation of the Indigenous women with disabilities from Asia as our Asia representatives. Some of the ground situations for Indigenous women with disabilities here. Indigenous persons with disabilities, women with disabilities were recognized of the identity. With identity, they do not receive disability certificate to prove themselves their disability and able with every government facilities. Lack of awareness always leads to deprivation of every basic rights, health, education, skills, reputations, was.
Can you? Yes, Chongsin, you can continue. You are muted. You are muted, Chongsin.
Indigenous persons with disabilities were not recognized without their disability certificates to prove themselves that they were disabilities and unable to avail Secondly, lack of awareness always leads them to deprive of every basic right to health, education, employment, skills, rehabilitation, was facilities. With the lack of facilities and inaccessibility in any sort of basic needs and requirements, with the geographical isolation from the power center. They are not aware about their rights and were not organized and marginalized within the indigenous peoples movement. In Asia, AIPP has not been able to organize and unite us, and we ourselves are far away from this institutional framework. So there is a huge need of networking, strengthening things of indigenous persons with disabilities. Inclusiveness in social is no inclusion at all levels at most. We are most often left behind in religious participation, and we are still far. Finally, backwardness also leads us to a risk life and self-responsible in every aspect of life. Our customary practices of our IP, indigenous people, has also left us behind in every decision-making platform. People with disabilities inclusion needs is needed, but these needs are often not recognized and access to justice always remain challenged. Um,
Can you
Niche.
continue? Yes.
Yeah. Peoples with disability inclusion is needed, but these needs are not and left behind. And the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Disaster Management Act 2005 of the Indian Constitution were not enforced or implemented in various parts states were mostly populated by the indigenous peoples, and their issues were not addressed by the government. Racial discrimination in India for the tribal peoples is rampant, and discrimination in all levels. Most of the women with disabilities and the indigenous women in India living, we're not at home, we're at home at all. They are not able to move outside due to fear feeling by the parents, relatives, neighbors, and our issues were not integrated in our issues were not integrated in inclusive ways. We feel that our issues were not included in national, global, local, national, and the global level. Our issues
Hello,
are,
Ipo.
we feel that our issues are not discussed, and our, and then I myself, being a woman with disabilities and indigenous minority in my state, and in my Women Commission platform, whenever I raise the indigenous women with disabilities issues in the national platform, I was being threatened sometimes by my higher authorities that we are not working for the cause of persons with disabilities. We are working for the these things happens because I felt that awareness is still very needed for the law enforcement body, for the higher authorities, because they are not aware with our disabilities issues. And today what I would like to strongly recommend is that persons with disabilities and women with disabilities leadership is more leadership is very much needed with well networking and organization. And also well, we don't have aggregated data, and then research and study work on persons with disability, indigenous persons with disabilities and indigenous women with disabilities is still lack. I would like to recommend that if we could have a proper and aggregated data as well, research work and studies to highlight more our issues and check our situation, then we will be really strengthening our movement in the coming days. These are the some few points which I would like to place before the floor. And thank you once again. Thank you each and everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Chongsin, for highlighting the issues of women with disabilities and indigenous women from Asia. You have clearly outlined about the realities that indigenous women and women with disabilities also have been facing during the COVID pandemic. And this clearly outlines about the reflection about how the international instrument on indigenous people, that is the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, the UN Permanent Forum recommendations, and the reflection of the World Conference on Indigenous Peoples Outcome document is being reflected at the grassroots level. So without further delay, we have been hearing the informations from our speakers that they're having some technical glitches. We will be shortly dealing with those challenges, but without any further delay, I would now like to go to the next speaker, who is Olga Montufar Contreras, and Olga is an Mexican indigenous woman with disabilities representing Latin America. She is also the president of the Paso Foundation of Indigenous Persons with Disabilities. She is also the co-chair of Indigenous Persons with Disabilities Global Network and the focal point for Latin America and the Caribbean for the indigenous people with disabilities, and also for the Permanent Forum coordinator of the Latin American Indigenous Women with Disabilities Network. Olga has been instrumental for raising and advocating the voice and in issues of indigenous people, including indigenous women with disabilities across Latin America and across the globe. So I would also now request Olga to highlight on the situation of indigenous women and women with disabilities in related to the implementation status of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, the outcome document, and also the recommendations provided by the Permanent Forum since 2011. Thank you. Over to you, Olga. You have the floor.
Muchísimas gracias, querida Pratima. Muchísimas gracias a NIDWAN por este evento. También, por supuesto, agradecer a FIMI la concentración de esta Conferencia Global de Mujeres Indígenas que nos da la oportunidad a las mujeres indígenas con discapacidad estar por primera vez manifestando nuestras inquietudes, pero sobre todo levantando la voz sobre nuestras mayores preocupaciones. Bienvenidas también hermanas de todo el mundo, de todas las regiones del mundo. Les agradezco infinitamente que estén aquí presentes en este momento para hablar justo del tema de las mujeres indígenas con discapacidad. Como ya lo ha comentado Pratima, efectivamente, las personas indígenas con discapacidad hemos hecho un largo camino a partir del 2012. Hemos logrado varias recomendaciones, tanto del mecanismo de expertos, el foro permanente, la Conferencia Mundial de los Pueblos Indígenas y otros, en el que de alguna manera tenemos recomendaciones que ciertamente han quedado pasmadas o plasmadas directamente en un papel, pero no la hemos visto reflejada en muchas de las vidas de las mujeres y específicamente mujeres y niñas indígenas con discapacidad. Desde los inicios de la historia se ha ocupado para definir al ser humano la palabra común. Se ha buscado la característica física donde representa la normalidad, entre comillas, de lo que es la concepción antropológica de este ser humano. Hay un paradigma conceptual heredado de la familia y de la sociedad que viene del patriarcado, del machismo, del capacitismo y de todos los sismos culturales e ideológicos que son parte de las estructuras de la discriminación y desigualdades múltiples que vivimos las mujeres y niñas indígenas con discapacidad. La teoría del género está muy vinculada con la teoría de la discapacidad, porque en ambos casos la diferencia y la discriminación están basadas en una corporalidad distinta. Aquí entra en juego el concepto de la interseccionalidad. Las personas no pertenecemos a una sola categoría social, sino a múltiples. Es decir, las mujeres no solamente somos mujeres indígenas, también existimos mujeres con discapacidad, mujeres indígenas con discapacidad, mujeres indígenas afrodescendientes o mujeres indígenas migrantes. Y cualquier identidad, cualquier categoría la tiene toda la diversidad humana. Analicemos nuestras situaciones y veremos que esto es así. Y justo me planteo este tema porque hemos visto que no actuamos y pensamos interseccionalmente. Y esto deja fuera de nuestro radar a diferentes colectivos que no tienen la misma etiqueta, de los grupos que se están defendiendo. Es decir, las mujeres solo luchan por mujeres sin discapacidad. Las mujeres indígenas generalmente solo luchan por mujeres indígenas y las mujeres con discapacidad luchan por mujeres con discapacidad. Así es que quedamos fuera dentro de esta única etiqueta y nosotros hemos visto que esto hace que nosotros seamos excluidas de estos contextos. Una forma de justificar la segregación es el paternalismo. No es una cuestión nueva o de una época moderna. El Código Civil de la época romana, que era ya manifestaba este paternalismo. Existía la interdicción, es decir, el reemplazo en la toma de decisiones por causa de discapacidad. Se piensa que de esa manera se está protegiendo el interés de la persona con discapacidad, que no sabe o no puede tomar decisiones. Y es esta la situación en la que se encuentran miles y miles de mujeres y niñas indígenas con discapacidad. Este es el principal desafío que nosotros tenemos desde el movimiento de personas indígenas con discapacidad y desde el movimiento de mujeres y niñas indígenas con discapacidad, porque debido a este paternalismo es que las mujeres indígenas con discapacidad se están negando a participar de este tipo de iniciativas que promuevan que promuevan el hecho de sacar sus derechos humanos, sus derechos y vulnerabilidades a la luz. Por esto es muy importante que las mujeres y niñas indígenas con discapacidad sean conscientes de sus derechos humanos para poder incidir, porque estén allí en foros como esta cumbre mundial de mujeres indígenas, donde libremente puedan expresar sus preocupaciones y para ello requerimos y necesitamos empoderarlos y debemos empoderar al mayor número posible de mujeres y niñas indígenas con discapacidad y aumentar sus capacidades para que ciertamente alcancen este estatus que nosotros estamos tratando de lograr para que se escuchen estas voces fuertes y poderosas. Se debe entender que la indiferencia y la falta de sensibilidad y la empatía son parte de la sociedad en la que coloca a las mujeres y niñas indígenas en una situación de vulnerabilidad. Yo quiero enfatizar que las características físicas o culturales de una persona con discapacidad no son la dificultad de estar en una condición de vulnerabilidad, sino más bien es el resultado de la acumulación de desventajas. Es importante considerar que la discriminación por motivos de discapacidad se debe principalmente a la normalización o naturalización de la condición de discapacidad, la cual provoca distinción, exclusión y restricción de los efectos que hacen que se obstaculice sus derechos o el ejercicio de sus derechos y dejan sin efecto su reconocimiento y goce en igualdad de condiciones que el resto de las mujeres indígenas. Hay que transformar el sistema, porque lo que hoy tenemos no es inclusivo, porque se basa en la lógica de lo normal, el cual es un paradigma excluyente y competitivo, en el que, por supuesto, las mujeres y niñas indígenas con discapacidad estamos sentadas. El movimiento de personas indígenas con discapacidad, como ya mencioné, ha recorrido un gran camino con todas estas dificultades que tiene el movimiento, en el que los factores que he mencionado anteriormente limitan la participación de muchos hermanos en este movimiento, pero que se refuerza que todo debe estar considerado desde un enfoque interseccional e intercultural. Si no trabajamos con estos dos conceptos, jamás encontraremos realmente el equilibrio para que las personas indígenas con discapacidad y en especial las mujeres indígenas con discapacidad estemos sentadas en el diálogo como en este momento. Tenemos varias recomendaciones de diversos instrumentos internacionales, entre ellos las Naciones Unidas, que hablan del movimiento de las personas indígenas con discapacidad. Las personas incluso indígenas con discapacidad hemos sido pioneras en el sentido de buscar diferentes mecanismos, por ejemplo, como la Convención del Niño, como la Convención de los Derechos de las Personas con Discapacidad, la Convención de los Derechos Económicos, Políticos y Culturales, en donde nosotros hemos llevado nuestras demandas. Sin embargo, estas recomendaciones no han impactado en nuestros países como nosotros quisiéramos. Por algunas de estas razones que ya he mencionado anteriormente, siguen siendo letra muerta y a pesar de los compromisos adquiridos por parte de los estados, esto no lo asumen como algo que realmente es prioritario. Por lo que deberíamos crear un mecanismo de seguimiento y evaluación serio que permita tener indicadores y marcar los avances en el cumplimiento de los derechos de las mujeres y niñas indígenas con discapacidad, pese a todo el pluralismo jurídico en el que nos encontramos por la diversidad de identidades que representamos. Las mujeres y niñas indígenas con discapacidad debemos sumarnos en la contribución de la construcción de alianzas para fortalecer para poder tomar más fuerza y que además esto hace que sea necesario por lo diminuto que somos en el colectivo. Debemos tener a aliadas como FIMI y otras organizaciones para que podamos erradicar esa protección excesiva y paternalista que tenemos de nuestras familias y de la comunidad. Sobre todo es importante que las mujeres indígenas con discapacidad muestren una verdadera sororidad junto con las mujeres indígenas y nos apoyemos y nos respetemos entre nosotras. Hemos comprobado que el movimiento de mujeres y niñas indígenas con discapacidad ha avanzado con varias recomendaciones con el apoyo y asesoría de mujeres indígenas. Por último, quiero mencionar que es muy importante ocupar espacios de toma de decisiones donde podamos asegurar que nuestras preocupaciones estén visibles. Nosotros hemos trabajado muchos años levantando la voz, pero es necesario estar del otro lado también. Y eso yo creo que es el desafío que tenemos. De ahora en adelante, me parece que si el lema de esta cumbre va a cumplirse, tendría que ser nada de las mujeres indígenas con discapacidad, sin las mujeres indígenas con discapacidad. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you so much for your remarks and highlighting the situation of Indigenous women and Indigenous women with disabilities from Latin America and Caribbean, Olga. I would also like to also emphasize the remarks that you have mentioned, that we need to build on allies with FEMI and other international organizations and network within the women, indigenous women, and person with disabilities. These are very crucial for us as indigenous women. The issue of intersectionality is one of the very emerging issue which need to be internalized and reflected in the work of indigenous people and indigenous women and women with disabilities. So without further delay, now I would like to go to Africa. We have Christine Kirungi from Africa. Christine Kirungi is a disability inclusion facilitator at Light for the World. She is the part of Work Initiatives team. She serves as the executive director of Uganda National Association of Cerebral Palsy. She proudly holds a bachelor degree in community-based rehabilitations obtained from Kayambo University, Uganda, and also the certificate of trainers on disability inclusion from Light for the World, certificate in resource mobilization from NUDIPU, and the leadership certificate in the international project management from the Danish Youth Council. She has been very much instrumental for raising the voices of women with disabilities, including indigenous women with disabilities in Africa. Without further delay, now I would like to give the floor to Christine. You have the floor, Christine, to highlight about the situation of women with disabilities in Africa and the situation of indigenous women in regard to the implementation status of the UN Declaration, and also the UN Permanent Forum recommendation and the World Conference outcome document on indigenous people. You have the floor. Over to you, Christine. Christine. Could you switch on your video, Christine, and then speak?
Sorry for taking long. From the description you gave me, I'm not Christine from Uganda. So that is why I was a little bit hesitant on maybe speaking about these issues. So I'm Christine Gandie. I'm from Kenya. I work for the rights of women and persons living with disability. Personally, I'm a mother. As you can hear from the background, I have a little child right now as I speak, but I will arrange how it can be assisted on that one. So I'm still programming myself. So let me talk about the issues that have been affecting people living with disabilities here in Kenya, and of course touch on issues that we've been going through as people living with disability. I have a physical disability personally. I was born in a family of 12 people. I'm the last born. I got this disability when I was 12 years old. So I've been able to live two lives, the one with disabilities and this one. Now I've lived with permanent disability. So for a long, I've gone through a lot of challenges to overcome that one. And of course, coming from an indigenous background, there is a lot of culture that prevent us from performing that certain roles, maybe being recognized and being able to have the voice like any other person within the community, within the family. So I've been able to overcome all those ones over the time. Personally, I'm from an indigenous community called Lenora community. This community had a challenge against the government for unfair eviction from their ancestral land way back in 1973. So in this one, the community took their case to African Commission after exhausting all local remedies. So in that process, we had a decision in 2010 over this ruling. And in regards to that one, we had a process of implementation. So from 2010 up to now, we are still implementing on some of the decisions that the African Commission made towards the government of Kenya. So first of all, we were supposed to be recognized and we were supposed to get a benefit coming out of this recognition as a distinct community. We were also supposed to get benefit coming out of the land that we were evicted from, and the government did economical activities within that land. So in that process, I was trying to represent the community during the African Commission session to share about the implementation process and then the challenges that the community maybe suffer in the process. So in that regard, I was able to, at some point, I was able to realize that there are some rights for my people. There are some people whom I represent that are left behind. And these people are persons living with disabilities, women. And at that point, we went back with other women within the community and formed an organization called Lenora Indigenous Women Empowerment Network. We registered in 2019, and we are in the process of trying to bridge the gap and bring a real representation to them. We've been trying to bust the build because the self-esteem for Indigenous women is low because of the way they were raising. They were brought up with the society. They were brought up with the sense that they are the second people. They look like children. They cannot make decisions. They cannot own land. They just sit there so that men can make decisions for them. So, and you know, the current 21st century is that we want a collective effort coming from development, both for our families and for our well-being as a society. So if we exclude women from decision making, if we exclude persons living with disabilities from exclusion making, then we will have a generation, we will have a community that is being left behind. We have a community that is not, their self-esteem is not well coming out. We will have a generation that is oppressed. So those are the things we are trying to do as a community. And most recently, we are able to do a research on the status of health and education in marginalized communities. So taking an example of my community being the one that is marginalized and it is indigenous, we realize that the services of government is not reaching out to the community. At this century, the community is still going far away to access health. Persons living with disability rights are not recognized. The declaration that talks about the rights of persons living with disability is not even understood. Our people, our persons living with disability in our community are not able to understand those rights. And we are in the process of trying to educate them so that they can be in a position to demand for their rights, so that they can understand their rights and demand for their rights. So, so far, as we've raised before, is that we have the challenges of institutional framework that here in Kenya, the National Council of Persons Living with Disabilities are mandated organization to educate persons living with disability, to do registration and share the challenges and see how best the government can mitigate, can reach out or can solve those challenges that persons living with disabilities are facing. But we have a challenge because the national institutions are not reaching out to rural areas. They only work within the urban areas, and as people living with disabilities, we are living in rural areas. So it becomes a challenge, and most of the people in rural areas are not even aware of their challenges. And then again, reaching out on their needs becomes a challenge. So if we have a community, we have a group of people that is left behind in terms of reaching out for their needs, it becomes a challenge. Again, we have the challenge of education. In Indigenous, in our community, that is NRO's community, the level of education is exclusive. We don't have an education mechanism that allows children with disability to integrate with the rest of the children. So at most of the time, when a parent gets a child with disability, they are excluded, they don't get education. And you know, if you exclude a person with disability, where if you don't give that person education, it becomes a challenge in future because that is the only livelihood they have. So if you give education to a child with disability, then you are making that child, you are giving the necessary, it's like giving another life, giving the second life. So that one, becomes a challenge, and we are really, if we can work as a network, if we can work towards ensuring
Christine, can you hear us? Christine? I hope we are having some internet fluctuation. That is why her internet is being interrupted. So we will again catch to Christine. This is what I would like to highlight to all the participants who is participating in this session. I think she might lost her connectivity. This is what I realize and see. So we have heard from Christine about the situation of Indigenous women and also women with disabilities and the issue of culture. And when it relates to issue of culture, she have clearly highlighted about the basic fundamental rights that Indigenous women and women with disabilities are not able to exercise: right to education, health, rehabilitation, employment, access to informations about the disability services, and also the services as a woman are not reached to Indigenous women, including women with disabilities. We would now like to go to the next speaker. I don't know, we are having some technical problems, but still we are sorting it out. Now I would like to go to the next speaker from the Pacific. We have Ipul Paswa. So if Ipul is attended over here, if you could switch off on your video, that would make sense for us. Ipul Paswa is a PhD student at Deakin University. She has almost spent 30 years in the field of agriculture and socio-economic research in PNG. She has also played a role as an advocate for the disability rights since 2006, and she has been leading the advocating for the rights and empowerment and promotion on the rights of Indigenous people, including persons with disabilities. She was instrumental in seeing the PNG government ratifying the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in 2030. She has also been instrumental in leading the advocacy role towards the PNG government to develop a stand-alone disability bill and to draft being finalized to be presented in the PNG National Executive Council by the Department for the Community Development. She headed the PNG Assembly for the Disabled Person in PNG for 9 years, and from 2009 to 2018, she then handed the baton to the emerging leaders taking the advisory role. So through her leadership, we also know that she has developed a structure for person with disabilities organization, and she has been very much engaged actively working on the rights of women with disabilities, and herself representing as an Indigenous woman with disabilities. She has been instrumental for raising their voices. I would now like to give the floor to Ipul Paswa from the Pacific. The floor is your, Ipul. And if you could on your video and speak, that would be great for us. Ipul, over to you.
Thank you, Pratima, but I cannot be allowed to start the video if you can get the host. Okay.
Thank you. Yes, we are able to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Greetings from the Pacific. Can you all hear me?
You are very clear, Ipul. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Pratima, and the organizing organization for this very important discussions around the involvement of Indigenous women with disabilities at the global level, but also at the national, regional and national level. The issues of women with disabilities, and particularly for Indigenous women with disabilities, is a great concern because whilst we are disabled, but also Indigenous, our voices have always been marginalized and has always been invisible at both the national, the regional, and the global level. There are some of us who have actually participated at global forums, the UNFPII, that's the Indigenous Forum, and we've come as advocates, as women with disabilities, but also representing the bigger constituencies of people with disabilities. I'd just like to, speak on how can we be able to operationalize or allow our governments to implement women's issues, but integrating issues of Indigenous women with disabilities. At the global level, there are political will, but when you really look at how these political wills are translating to implementation at the national level, it is very difficult. For one reason, because we do not have concerted voice at the national level. I have been one of those that have struggled in my country to try to see how we can be able to set up our own women with disability networks within the country. In the Pacific, most of the almost 90% or 95% of countries in the Pacific are Indigenous. We are Indigenous people within the Pacific. Yet when you really look at mainstream women issues, we do not seem to be counted in the mainstream women's issues. I have been part of participants in many of the Pacific Women Shaping Pacific Development. They would invite me to attend the workshops, but I am not seeing any other women. And so one of the things I seem to be seeing, and it has been highlighted by the previous panelists, the issues of education. A lot of our women with disabilities are not accessing education. And without education, we are not able to access the other areas, the services areas, service areas within, employment, formal employment. Even within the informal employment, we seem to see that resources are not provided for women with disabilities. I joined the disability movement based on my attending this disability movement in 2006, when I heard 3 women with disabilities talking about the inaccessible or in access to the services. One, talked about how she cannot be able to come to the main markets to sit down and sell her produce because she sits in a wheelchair. She's not been given a stall to at least put a garden produce, and she's always left behind whenever she comes to the market. The other woman, when she wants to come into town, the transport services are not accessible for her because most of the trucks, they are in the diner trucks, so she cannot climb up with a wheelchair. There was another woman who when she goes to access the health services, she's often told that she can stay behind, and the nurses and the nurse or the medical officers will treat the other so-called normal people first before they could attend to her. And these are the issues at the national level we face. So how can we be able to get our issues onto our country report that is always presented at regional and global level? For us in the Pacific, and I'm speaking for my country, these are real issues that women with disabilities face. So how can we be able to do that? And so I guess one of the strategies is that we need to have our own voices in country, setting up an organization of women with disabilities. Because we are Indigenous women, we don't demarcate ourselves as Indigenous or non-Indigenous. So we have an organization for women with disabilities in the country. We've just launched our organization. We have put together our strategic plan, and we'd like to hold hands with partners. I guess it is really about building bridges where you can be able to get your voices onto the platforms, the various women platforms that we aspire to have our voices heard at. And so these are the challenges that we are facing, but we need to start to move with the initiatives or with the development, what should I say, the movements that's going on. There's so many women, mainstream women programs that are going on, but we really need to capture that. And for me, that is really what I'd like to see. For our voices to be heard and for implementations to be effective back at our national level, we really need to stand up and be our own voices. We cannot have others. And so I have sat at the UN and I've listened to the very important discussions going on. Then they put Indigenous women, they put issues on women with disabilities, but Indigenous women seems to be left out. And so I guess for us, advocates of Indigenous people with disabilities, but more so Indigenous women with disabilities, we need to develop strategies at our national level to being able to partner with mainstream women's organizations, but disability organizations as well, so that we can have our voices as Indigenous women with disabilities. I guess that is really what we really need to advocate more. And I was listening into the conversations and the declaration by NIDWAN. I am so happy that there's something that we really need to translate into all our other national outcome statements that needs to get, we need to get into the nitty-gritty of what the development agendas are and try to get ourselves to make sure that our voices are heard, not just women with disabilities, but Indigenous women with disabilities. Because a lot of rural women, and particularly Indigenous rural women with disabilities, continue to be left out. And so as an advocate in the Pacific and in my own country, I'm trying to see how I can be able to use my voice as a platform to try and get our issues onto the national agenda first. And once we are there on the national agendas, we know that we can push ourselves into the regional and the global. But it's a very big challenge, and it is good that we continue to discuss these issues. We continue to learn from each other so that we can now start to build the bridges. So thank you. That's my short presentation, and I'm very happy that this event is happening, and we really need to move together, both at our national level, but at the regional level as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ipul, for your wonderful remarks, also highlighting about the challenges and also way forward what needs to be done. So we definitely acknowledge and realize building the synergy within ourselves, within the Indigenous women's movement, and also within the disability and other women's movement. This is what you have really highlighted as a very key important message to us. And without any further delay, I would also highlight that we were supposed to have a Women Enabled International, who is a global organization working on the rights of women with disabilities at the global level. So they have also sent us remarks that Women Enabled has been working for women with disabilities, but highlighting about all this situation and knowing about the context of Indigenous women and women with disabilities on the ground, they have committed working together for the disability inclusion. That includes the voices and also the issues and challenges faced by Indigenous women with disabilities specifically. So with this remark that has been sent to us with Women Enabled, we are near to our time, and we are about to wrap the session. We would also now like to go to the second round, where we have received some questions from our participants who have been attending this event. So we have already listened to the speakers from Asia, Africa, from Latin America,
Asia, Africa, and Latin America,
and from the Pacific. So with all these struggles and with all these commitments that we have received from them, we would also now like to request all the distinguished speakers to have their opinion, because they are the major human rights defenders working at the grassroots level, at the national level, for the rights of women with disabilities and indigenous women with disabilities. So I would now request the speakers that what needs to be done further from an individual level, from the institutional level, to ensure the rights of indigenous women, girls, and women with disabilities at the regional level, so that we can collectively build the synergy and move collectively in coming days. So all the distinguished speakers are requested to take the floor. I would now request all the speakers, if you could turn on your video and unmute yourself and have your opinion. Thank you. To you. Yes, Olga, you can move ahead.
My video is not working.
Bueno, gracias, Pratima, nuevamente. Gracias por la pregunta también. Y yo considero que es muy importante el hecho de poder crear redes. Me parece que esta es la base para que las organizaciones que hemos construido, que son de alguna manera, lo comenté, pequeñas sobre mujeres y niñas indígenas con discapacidad, pueda fortalecerse con otras organizaciones y otras redes más grandes de mujeres indígenas. Ciertamente, yo lo he dicho, el movimiento de mujeres con discapacidad también está atendiendo el tema de las mujeres indígenas con discapacidad. Sin embargo, a mí me parece que hay un abismo todavía muy grande para que este tipo de organizaciones conozca la interculturalidad en la que las mujeres indígenas con discapacidad vivimos. Por ello es que yo llamo la atención a las organizaciones de mujeres indígenas para que ellas sean quienes nos acompañen en el proceso. Sabemos realmente que es un desafío que las niñas y mujeres indígenas con discapacidad se sumen por todo este paternalismo del que yo hablé durante mi presentación. Hemos visto también que no se ha podido aún trabajar con esta mirada de la interseccionalidad, que yo creo que también es algo que tenemos que reforzar. Pero por supuesto, sigo reforzando lo que ya han dicho varias de las panelistas. Las recomendaciones que ya se tienen hoy tienen que realmente verse reflejadas en el terreno, es decir, desde lo local. Todo lo que se genera tiene que venir desde lo local para subir hacia lo global. Entonces, estas recomendaciones tenemos que verlas realmente puestas en práctica, y para eso sí deberíamos de demandar la oportunidad de que los estados se sienten a dialogar y a consultarnos directamente a las mujeres sobre las situaciones que nos preocupan. He mencionado durante mi participación que también es muy importante que estemos en los espacios de toma de decisiones. Mientras no estemos en esos espacios, seguiremos en el olvido, porque se olvida que toda esta gran diversidad humana en la que estamos las mujeres y niñas indígenas con discapacidad. Gracias.
Thank you, Olga. I would now request to Christine, Ipul, and Chongsin, any of you to take the floor.
Okay, this is Chongsin. I see. I could not on my video, so I think I'm audible.
Yes, go ahead, sister.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, as I have mentioned a little bit in my speech also, in addition, what I would like to add this is that today we're having such a very wonderful discussion and conversation in this platform with the initiation of FIMI and then of our NIDWAN, Nepal Indigenous Women Disabled Association, national. So likewise, we need to have more discussions, more dialogues to integrate our issues and to put up in a concrete level. This is what I want to add up once again. And then mandatory inclusion to participate meaningfully in every local, national, and the global level is, I would like to strongly recommend on this also. Through the World Conference, I think I would like to have a strict instruction or instruction, I should say, that to the local bodies, to the local government, as well to the national, and even in every global platform. If our inclusion in every stakeholders discussion, if we can raise our issues, if we can highlight our ground realities, from that onwards we will be developing things. So this is what I would like to add up. And when talk about is education and health, which is one of the most important, and at the same time information. See, every indigenous community in Asia, we are mostly living in the hill areas. So when it comes to internet and other means of communication and transport, we are very lacking. In organizing one program, for example, let's say in the valley, people can come in within 5 minutes with 10 or 20 rupees. But then for our indigenous people, with our geographical location also, we are taking more time, and then we need to spend more energy, more things. So in this condition, in this situation, we need to be very informative, and then how shall we we should be.
Thank you.
I mean,
thank you,
if we
Chongqing,
can come more than, if we have more leadership, if we can come out more than and in one platform, then it will be more effective in the coming days.
Thank you, Chongqing. Now I would like to request Christine from Africa and Ipul from Pacific to take the floor. That what can we do to move forward to build and integrate the ensuring the rights of indigenous women and women with disabilities, and the position that you have right now, personally and institutionally.
Thank you, Pratima. It's simply I cannot get myself the video to come on. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to put forward my, okay, I'm coming on now. Okay, so as I said, a lot of our women with disabilities in our countries do not have voices. And there's only a few of us who have put up our hands to be the leaders. But you see, what I have noticed is that whatever happens in any country depends on who the leaders are. And so when you have very active leaders, we tend to have our voices heard at the national level. Let me give you an example. I had given the baton for leading the disability movement a few years ago. It was 3 years ago. And after my coming back from my studies, I've noticed that there has not been much movement. And so it goes back to effective leaders at our national level if we want to continue to have our issues heard at that level, at the national level. So building leadership at the national level is very, very important. And so, as I mentioned, we have a strategic plan that we'd like to start to have our young girls, young emerging women with disabilities to actually be taught to how to, advocate. And if we can start to do that, it needs that concerted effort. So we really need to look at good leaders that we can appoint to lead the disability movement in the country, and women with disabilities network, not just the mainstream disability movement, but specifically for women with disabilities. We need to have our own voices. And once you start to advocate and you start to teach young emerging women with disabilities, Indigenous women with disabilities, they will start to come out and they will start to change the conversations around the issues that are facing Indigenous women with disabilities. So it's really the onus, the responsibilities on us at the national level, if we want this change to happen at the national, regional, and at the global level. I also mentioned that the political will is coming in from the global forums, so global programs. But when it comes to the regional and the national level specifically, there is no recognition for Indigenous people with disabilities, and most of women with disabilities. So we at the Indigenous, at the national level needs to start to look at how best can we build its capacities within our movement so that they can be the voice when some of us who have been leading take the back step. Because I have seen that because we are here, we have Pratima and Olga and Ipul and Christine. But when we take a back seat, if we don't build that capacity within our emerging leadership, then the voices will be very, very, there will be no voices for women with disabilities, and particularly Indigenous women with disabilities. So my take at this is we need to build the capacities of the movements, women within the movements, but also strengthen the organization so that it can be a voice. And it's a long-term issue, but one of the things is we really need to push for a legal framework. For us in Papua New Guinea, we are looking at that disability bill where it also talks about representation of Indigenous women with disabilities. So this is where we can make it stronger at the regional, at the national level. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Olga. Now I would like to give the floor to, Ipul. Now I would like to give the floor to Christine from Africa. Christine, are you there? Christine? Are you there, Christine? Can you take the floor with the question? What needs to be done in an individual and institutional level when we enhance the rights of Indigenous women and women with disabilities at the regional level with your own mandate and the position that you have working at the national level and regional level? Thank you, Christine.
If I got the question right, is that what can be done, maybe at individual and at the okay, anyway, let me pick the question like this. What can be done is that we need to do a lot of awareness. The government has to maybe tighten what they are doing to us. They need to work more remorsefully through the National Council. And we need to be supported as an institution. As I've said to you, is that we have an organization that works for the rights of Indigenous women and persons with disabilities and Indigenous women with disabilities. And in that regard, our institutional is so small. And out of what has been happening, a lot of funding does not come to support the rights of people with disabilities. Most of the funding goes to Indigenous people, And when we get to apply for the support, for institutional support to strengthen our capacity, we are not, most of the time we are not being considered, because most of the, it means that most people have not taken the rights of people with disabilities, so that, you know, when we are cut out of this discussion, it means that our voice will be left out. So if we, that is my advice, that maybe we can focus more on the voice of person with disabilities, we focus more on Indigenous people, especially women, so that we have a collective voice for all people. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christine, for your remarks, and definitely with all these distinguished speakers and panelists from different regions have clearly outlined about the importance of the meaningful participation of Indigenous women, girls, and women with disabilities at all levels. The grassroots level mechanism and institution has to be built. The national, regional, and the global initiatives have to interlink with each other. When it comes to the issue of gender, ethnicity, and disability, due to these multiple identities that we hold as Indigenous women with disabilities, we realize that we are everywhere, but in reality, we are nowhere. And this is what Christine have clearly outlined when it comes to fund and resources. So we need to amplify our voices, our struggles, building our capacity, grooming our leadership, setting our young generations to the leadership, and also listening to the stories from the ground, listening to the narratives. We have been claiming ourselves that we are distinct because we are different from women, we are different from Indigenous women, and we are different from Indigenous women with disabilities. So as an Indigenous women with disabilities, today in the Second World Conference, we are holding this interactive dialogue to also to amplify our voices, struggles that we have been facing as Indigenous women and as a women with disabilities. But at the same time, we are also advocating, sensitizing, and claiming our spaces as Indigenous women within the Indigenous women's movement at the global level. So I believe that the journey of Indigenous women with disabilities have started, and we would like to have a collaboration, consultation, and communication with all our brothers and sisters from the global, regional, and national level to include disability inclusion, which includes the issue and fundamental rights related with their accessibility needs. Like right now, we have sign language interpreter, we have English to Nepali language interpreter, which are crucial when it comes to Indigenous women and women with disabilities. So if we are not able to provide these fundamental rights, again, we believe that this Second World Conference will not be in a right-based approach. Again, we will realize ourselves that we are being left behind. But when it comes to this, all this situation, we feel that we are moving ahead with the suggestion, collaboration, and consultations with our sisters. So the Second World Conference has opened a space for all of us to have this interactive dialogue and discourse on the emerging issues of Indigenous women with disabilities. As our earlier speaker have clearly outlined, that we want to be leaders. We want to lead the world of Indigenous people, being an Indigenous women with disabilities. And in this regard, I believe, and as an organizer, I believe that this conference has laid a space for us to discuss our collective issues when it comes to the issue and rights of Indigenous women, the right to self-determination, the commonalities of individual and collective rights, and also the right to self-autonomous is very much crucial for Indigenous women and women with disabilities. We would like our government, development partners, different civil society organizations, women organizations, Indigenous peoples organization of people with disabilities, and other marginalized organizations working at the national level to realize and understand about inclusion. The narratives of inclusion have been deliberately used by different stakeholders, including state, in different aspects. And we do not want the narrative of inclusion to be manipulated. It has to be framed with the slogan of nothing about us without us, and everything about us with us, keeping Indigenous women, girls, and women with disabilities in center. If this is being done, then we realize that we are together for making this world sustainable, peace and prosperity, and inclusive for all people. So with these remarks, I would like to wrap up the session. We are very much honored to have all the panelists from different regions. We hope this conversation has started, and we believe this conversation is not the last conversation. This conversation will be a continuous conversation from the global, regional to the local or national level, and also from bottom to top approach from national, regional, and global level. So we have to amplify our voices as Indigenous women and women with disabilities. When it comes to the concluding observation of the CEDA, the Beijing Platform for Action has also not been able to achieve and realize the issue of intersectionality. So we see that there are different layers and different international instruments which need to be contextualized in regard to the collective rights of Indigenous women and women with disabilities. So we are trying our efforts with all the relevant stakeholders to bridge this gap of individual rights and collective rights, and to build a commonalities so that we share the same experience, realities, and we exercise our rights as other people in a dignified way. So we believe that the concluding observation, including the recommendation of the UN Permanent Forum, the implementation status of the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, including the outcome document of the World Conference, will put forward when it comes to the political document of the Second World Conference of Indigenous People, all these issues that have highlighted in this interactive session will be integrated. And we realize that Indigenous women, including Indigenous women with disabilities for the first time in the history, will be reflected in the political document. And I believe, and we believe, 28 million Indigenous women with disabilities and 54 million Indigenous people with disabilities across the globe will realize that we have stepped ahead our advocacy and our movement at the global level. This is what we want to see as an Indigenous woman and we as a women with disabilities. We will continue our collaboration with all our allies, with all the relevant stakeholders to exercise and to enjoy the rights for Indigenous women and women with disabilities. With this note, we look forward having more collaboration with our sisters. I would like to thank FEMI and the entire different networks and organizations of Indigenous women from all the 7 geopolitical regions who have collectively extended solidarity and support and a collaborative effort for moving together with us. We believe that this journey has started and we are collectively in this journey to support each other. With this note and with these remarks, I would like to extend all my gratitudes, thanks to all the distinguished speakers who have shed light on the challenges of Indigenous women and women with disabilities from different regions. And also I would like to thank to the technical person who are supporting us. We have sign language interpreter for the deaf people. I would like to thank the technical person Dinesh and Prakatji, who is supporting for our deaf participants. I would like to also thank Mr. Tunga Vadrarai, who is translating from Nepali, from English to Nepali for our Nepali participants. I would also like to thank to the Spanish translator who has been translating the Spanish language into English language. And apart from that, we have also the entire technical team of FIMI who is supporting for us to have this session successfully executed. So I would like to thank all these technical teams, but not the least, I would like to thank all my and our participants who have participated this event, who have listened to our stories from different regions, and who have also communicated to us that we are collective in this journey. I would like to thank all the participants, all the representatives attending this event, and would also like to assure and commit that we would continue this collaboration and discussion in coming days. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your patience and listening to our interactive session. I would also request that on 27th, we have a session focused on the intersectionality, a look at women with disabilities. So we have a dedicated session from the organizer of the Second World Conference of Indigenous Women, having a dedicated session on intersectionality and looking at the lens from women with disabilities on 27th of August. So I would like to request all the participants to attend that upcoming session on 27th, and our last session, that is the closing session, is on 2nd of September. I would also kindly request all our Indigenous brothers and sisters and women with disabilities attending this session, and we would like to extend our support for participating in this event. Thank you very much. And Margarita, I see you. Over to you. Thank you. We would like to take a collective photo with all of you.
Exactly,
Yeah.
Pratima, thanks. So
If you, the technical team can.
Please, Christine,
Yes.
can you please put on your camera? And Olga, yes. And we still have Christine to come on. And Justine, if you would like a collective photo. And I just want to add to what Pratima have said, acknowledging your participation and reminding you that on August 27, we will have the third journey of this Second World Conference of Indigenous Women. And as like now, we will have an opening plenary, and after the plenary, we will have interactive sessions. So you are most welcome to join us on the third session, where we will be looking at and recognizing ourselves from our own realities. This will be the approach of the third day. And I just want to say to NIDWAN, to Pratima, and to all sisters that came along with these powerful messages, with these powerful testimonies, making visible the invisibility of Indigenous women with disability, and bringing your knowledge, your struggle, and all the effort to build bridges, as you said, to build alliance, and sharing with all the attendees that remain with us. We thank you very much for coming to this session also. We hope to see together next Friday, August 27, for the third journey of this Second World Conference. Thank you on behalf of FIMI.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you
And I
so
have also
much.
taken the photograph. So thank you for all the
Beautiful.
participants and also the
Ako na
entire
ko di sa
technical
pananin
teams and
piki
Fimi.
nga photograph
So we would like to thank our deaf participants. This is what we do with 2 hands. So we would like to thank our deaf participants too. Thank you so much.
Thank you each and everyone. Thank you, Sister Pratima too.
Thank you, everyone.
We will
Olga.
really need your support to strengthen our networking and in the ground. Thank you, Phoebe, and thank you all the technical team for your support. Have a good day.